go ahead and find our seats. All right. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to kind of talk about some, tips and tricks about assembly of equipment, maintenance of the equipment. Thank you. Sorry. One of the sustainability at the CSBA had a Zoom meeting the other night where we actually had a talk about different things, considerations as far as assembling different equipment. And so sometimes there's different ways that we can make sure that we're protecting our equipment and protecting our investment. And a lot of this depends on what your goals are as a beekeeper, what your budget is as a beekeeper, how many hives you're having to deal with, what is the volume of, someone that is only doing, maybe 100 frames may have a different perspective than someone who does 10,000 frames on what their goals are. So take all this with a grain of salt, and I want this to be a very interactive discussion because I know that there's a lot of you that have a lot of great techniques as well. One of the things that I learned in the sustainability talk was if you're using wood glue, the Tight Bond 3 glue, which is the green label, is actually food safe. So that's what you are recommended to use for like cutting board assembly and things like that. It's waterproof. It's great. So that was another benefit of, if you're going to put something in a beehive, you want to make sure that, we're making food products. You're trying to make sure that things are healthier for us. The thing with wood glue is, this is a personal choice. Some people like to glue everything. There's a lot of advantages to doing that. Wood glue actually makes a bond that is stronger than the wood itself. And if you're spending a lot of money on these hives, you want them to last a long time, gluing does make a lot of sense to be able to maintain it. Others, it's not that big a deal. You either go through equipment or they have other strategies, so it's a personal thing. But I just wanted to mention that the Tight Bond 3 glue with the green label is food safe, so that's the one I would recommend. So I was going to start a little bit with frames. So, we end up making a lot of different frames because obviously we're using these primarily as the structure within our hives that we're maintaining. And one of the tips that I learned early on, which is kind of nice, is when you're assembling these, if you're gluing them, this doesn't apply, but if you're just doing stapling, what you want to make sure you do is you're not just stapling straight from the top. It's really tempting to do because you can make really simple jigs to make a whole bunch of frames all at once. But what often happens is your bees will glue these things into your hive with propolis, and you go to pry it up, and what happens is the top bar pries right off of the rest of the frame. And especially if it's a brood frame, it's just not something you want to deal with. So there are a couple different strategies that you can use to help mitigate that. One is you can either staple through the sides of the dog ears that are over here. Advantages and disadvantages. One of the things you need to make sure is that the staple is flush or slightly indented. You don't want the staples to stick out from it because the way that these frames are built is for bee space. It is putting frames right next to each other gives us the appropriate bee space between the frames. If you have staples that are sticking out farther, you're now actually spacing your frames further apart. You're more likely to get cross-combing. You're more likely to get propolis formation that actually makes it glued together. So you want to make sure that you're ideally flush or slightly indented there. The other strategy that you can use on one of these, I put one in to show, is you can staple from this side right under the dog ear. But what we're doing is we're allowing the staple to have a mechanical strength against that force to help keep the frame in good shape. Okay? One of the things that I also found is a lot of times if I'm using pneumatic stapler, depending on, wood in Colorado dries out and you start getting weird things happening. And so sometimes you end up getting splitting that happens when you're doing nailing. And so one of the things I've found is if I just take the sidebars and I soak them in water for a couple of hours, it softens them up and the wood is less likely to split when you're using tools to pneumatically staple. So that's one of the little tips and tricks that I do. Was that? Oh, because I'm a rocket scientist. So I typically run with foundation frames, so I have a plastic foundation in here. But one of the tricks that I do is I make one foundationless frame like this, and I put it in my hives. And what typically happens if I do it this way is they're allowed to build their own comb on this however they want, and almost always it ends up being complete drone frame. And so it allows me to kind of manage where my drones are in the hive by only having one frame that is that they can build their own. Other people use different strategies. They may use a medium frame in a deep space and they build drone comb off the bottom. I found sometimes that they glue it to the bottom box and it tears apart every time I'm doing it, which if you're using drone removal as a mite management technique or you're feeding them to your chickens, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I really prefer to use this kind of a technique. So that was just kind of a hint. If you are making foundationless frames, you typically are going to have wires that are going along the frame. And this is basically to provide you a little extra structure so that you don't end up dumping all the wax out of your frame on the ground. It's also important to note that there's a different way of handling the frame when you're doing inspections, so that instead of picking it up and looking at it and flipping it like this, as soon as you do this, that wax may fall out and all your brood and everything, and it's not a pleasant thing. Yeah?
Not to get too far afield, but if you explain why you want to, as far as possible, isolate your drone brood in one place.
Yep, I'll come right back to that. So if you are inspecting frames that are foundationless, so that don't have that structure in them, the way you need to handle it is you're going to pick it up, you're inspecting your one side, you tilt it up, you tilt it sideways, you tilt it upside down, you look at the other side. So basically you're keeping all that weight within the frame to keep that wax intact. You want to make sure that you're not dipping it down. And then the other thing that I do is I take tongue depressors and I glue them into that top groove in the frame, and then I just put a little bit of beeswax on it to give them something to encourage them to start building from that point. If you're going to put the wire, there are usually 4 holes. If you buy them commercially, you don't need to have all 4 holes with wires through them. Usually the 2 in the middle are sufficient. And what you're going to do is you get some steel wire. It's not special wire or anything like that, just a good 28 gauge wire. And I took a little linoleum tack and you put it kind of between the 2 middle holes, and you wrap your wire around it and you run it through and run it back and then run it around it and then tap it down. And the hint on that is don't overdrive it, because if you make it too tight and hammer it down, you'll break the wires and have to start over again. So I'll go ahead and pass this around.
For that kind of frame, do you put that at a certain place in your box?
So because I'm using it for drone frame, and this plays into why I'm doing this as drone frame, you can use drones as a means of mite management. Mites preferably develop on drone brood over worker brood. So what you can do is, if you get it to right when they cap the drone frame and you take it out, you can freeze it, you can scratch the edge and shake out all the little developing larvae and any mites that may have been associated with that. It also gives you a chance to look to see, hey, do I have a lot of mites on there? you can then put it back in, and the queen will relay drones in there. It all kind of keeps it together. Now, what you want to do, or how I manage mine, is I usually put my drone frame usually in my upper box, and it's on the edge of the brood frames. So usually it's like the third one in from, and I tend to find that drones like the western side more than the eastern side. So I tend to put it on the western side of my hives. Yeah.
Do you face your hives north or south?
Question
I
is,
face
do you
mine south.
your hives north or south?
But I tend to find they tend to like the warmer side. Whether I'm using these or they're making their own drone comb, however, I tend to find the drones hang out on the western side, and whether it's even if it's the front of the hive, But I tend to find them all located more in one area than others. Yeah.
So I will just say, if you're going to feed it to your chickens after you take it out, don't just put the frame in the chicken coop, because it will get chicken poop all over it. So it's best if you kind of strap it in, like tie it to the fence around your chicken, so they have to peck at it from the side, and then they won't poop all over.
So if you're going to feed them to chickens, make sure that you don't just lay it in a chicken coop, or it'll have chicken poop on it and it'll move around.
Yeah, chickens, but my neighbor did, and so we thought, oh, this is this great symbiotic relationship, like this is you. And she brings it back to me, I'm like, okay.
Yep.
It's kind of fun because she brings me eggs, and I'm like, okay, so we're just trading protein back here.
That's right. Yeah,
You attest to the chicken poop?
Yeah. I've also heard that some chickens really like drone brood and some don't. So it is a complete mystery, just like everything else. So I also know some people that what they do is they cut out the whole wax and put the frame back in again. I don't like to do that because it is so energetic to make new wax. And especially if it's not in the springtime, it's harder for them to make large volumes of wax. So I like to preserve my wax as much as possible. So I'd rather just scrape the cappings off and either let the chickens pick them out themselves or shake them out. I don't have chickens, but as a mite management tool. So that's just one strategy that I utilize as part of my integrated pest management. Yeah.
If you want to do that right, you can probably also go with the green plastic frames.
Yeah, you can do the green plastic frames, which are they're basically the cell size that is imprinted into the plastic is larger for drone cells. So the size that they're actually going to draw for that template is larger. So they tend to make it all drone. So you can do it the same way that way. And that's actually one of the reasons that I mark my drone frames with green on top, just so that I'm easier identifying as I'm going through my hives.
Question mark, when do you take these frames out?
The question is, when do you take these frames out?
Yep. So drone brood takes 28 days to emerge as a adult drone. So basically what you're looking at trying to do is you want it to be right after they've capped over the drone brood, because that's when all the mites are in. What you really don't want to do is put in a lot of drone frames and then not take them out before the cappings and the drone have emerged, because you end up with more mites per cell on drone than you do on workers because of the longer gestation and higher nutrient content. So where a worker cell is going to generate 4 to 5 adult mites coming out of an emerging worker, you're going to have 7 or more in drones. So you want to make sure that you take it out before those drones have emerged. So you have a little bit of a window there while they're capped, but that's essentially the time that you want.
So what time of year do you do that?
Well, obviously it's when they're making drones.
Question is, what time of the year do you do
and
that?
along with this is looking at doing regular mite inspections. So, you should be doing mite inspections at least once a month, and looking on am I seeing mites or not? If I am actually seeing a significant number of mites, then I'm going to be more aggressive at using that technique to get rid of them. If I am doing sugar shakes or alcohol wash and I have 0 mites, I'm less likely to worry about it, and I'm rather let my good genetics of my perfect hives help with all my neighbors' hives to get my genetics out. Yeah.
Yeah. When do you start doing your mite tests?
Perry?
Question is, when do you start doing your mite test?
I was doing starting in April or May, but the main
Starting April or May.
this is on many owners' side. If you do a good mite treatment early in the year, in the springtime, you have a better chance of them surviving through the winter, the bees surviving through the winter. Although you do need to also do
If you do a mite treatment early on, then you have a better chance of them surviving.
about the time that they start taking the drones out, or even before they start raising the winter bees. That whole deal about having healthy bees to raise the winter bees is really important.
Yep. And we will be talking a lot about mites through the course of the year. Mites are by far the biggest threat that we face as managed hives. And in fact, this year, just from what I'm hearing, all along the Front Range, there have been fairly high colony losses, and a lot of that is due to mites. A lot of these may also have been late season. We had a really long, hot October, and my bees were flying, and there was nothing out there. And even if I got my mite levels low, they may be robbing out mite bombs of my neighbors because they're looking for any extra food that they can bring in. And they may be reinfecting the hive later in the season than this past year than what I've seen previously. But you definitely want to keep on top of those mites. That's also why I tend to, I know we're digressing a little bit on mite management, but I often do an oxalic acid vaporization kind of between Thanksgiving and Christmas. That's typically when they're broodless or very minimal brood during that time frame, and that's when oxalic acid is the most effective. So it's a really good way to knock down any residual mites going into the winter, is doing an oxalic acid vaporization kind of in that Thanksgiving to Christmas time. So boxes. For new beekeepers, you can either buy assembled boxes. There are wooden construction. There are plastic construction. There's a lot of different choices. If you haven't ordered, you need to be ordering your hives now to, like I said, get them in, be able to prep them and get them ready. It gives you time to do it. Unassembled hives are a lot cheaper than assembled boxes, and it's fairly easy to do. They're all rabbited or other types of joints to put them together. You can glue them. I don't like using the nails that come with them. The nails, especially in Colorado, we have humidity changes, we have temperature changes. They will work themselves out fairly quickly, and you'll end up with a much shorter lifespan by using just straight nails. I tend to use screws, or once again, gluing is also a really good means of doing that. You want to try to make sure that when you're assembling your boxes together, you're making them square. So having a little square is helpful. As you're stacking them up, that will help minimize gaps and things like that. Realize that a lot of times when you're buying mass-produced boxes, they're not all cut and wood finished in the same way. So sometimes you end up with gaps, especially around the corners. So you may need a little plane to kind of be able to level things out to make it a nice surface, so you don't have big air gaps between your boxes when you assemble them. Another thing is, don't always just take plans off the internet at face value. I learned that because I built a whole bunch of these little wooden nuke boxes, and found out that whoever made the plans, the dimensions are not exactly great. So there's actually too much space in here for 5 frames, so I actually need to make following boards to adjust the space in here. Otherwise, I end up with either the wax on the outside frames going really wonky and really deep beyond the frame, or they start building wax itself on the other surfaces of them. So just pay attention to double checking the math on someone else's plans, so don't make the same mistakes that I did. When we are painting these or sealing them, or there's a lot of different things that you can do. Once again, we're spending a lot of money on our equipment, and it's well worthwhile to protect it over time. And there's different ways that you can do it. Different beekeepers have different strategies. There's not necessarily a lot of right and wrongs. The only real wrong is you don't want to be painting the insides of the box. You want to have it as natural wood where the bees are going to be. And that's also true with the surfaces between the boxes. So you don't want to paint these, because what will happen is they'll actually just seal between the boxes, and then it'll be harder to tear them apart, and then that paint will peel off and things like that. So what you can do is you just put painter's tape along the edge of the box when you're painting it. You can use just a good exterior latex paint. Some people like to use stains. Some people, if they want their equipment to last forever, can do microcrystalline wax dipping, but we don't have a lot of resources to do that locally. There is a possibility that KT has a rig that she's setting up. She may do it at the club level around the state, but it's typically only on new boxes. You typically are not going to be dipping something that has been used in wax, but the advantage of that is the wax penetrates the wood all the way through. It almost never needs additional treatment, and it will last for a decade. But it takes more complicated equipment. You're basically dipping it in hot wax and letting it sit there for a period of time, and once again, it's not always commonly available. So the most common is either using a good exterior latex or a stain. Any other comments? Yeah, Barry.
Jen Fuller handed me on to a product that's called Eco Wood Treatment. Mm-hmm. And he treats his boxes with it and swears up and down they will last forever.
Yep. Isn't that what you used, the Eco?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eco wood.
Is it from
Yeah,
like
Eco Wood.
Yeah.
It's called Eco Wood Treatment.
Now with some of the Eco wood boxes that after a while it dries out, and I'm now planning on probably putting paint on them. And I'm a little lazier than you. I like to put a big stack all my boxes. A cinder block, I stack my boxes and I just sit with a roller. And
Which is fine.
6 of them at the same time.
You just want to make sure that you're not getting inside or on the top surfaces of it. Yeah, Em.
So paint is expensive, but almost every paint store, Lowe's, Home Depot, has mist tinted paint. So
Yes.
you want to make sure you're getting exterior mist tinted paint, and you don't care about the color. You can get some good deals.
Yes, a great
And
source is
referencing
paint stores, the
Oops
Home
Paint or
Depots, the
mist tinted
Lowe's,
paint from
for mist
Home
tinted
Depot or Lowe's.
paint, so that you can pick it up cheap. Just make sure that it's good exterior.
Interesting colors.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry?
Geiger's has just a ton of mist paint.
Geiger's is a great source. That's fantastic. One other thing that does help is having different colors and different patterns does help with drift. So what happens is your bees fly out of the hive, and they go into the front of the hive for their orientation flight, and they're looking at your hive and what is the background field behind the hive. That is what they're going to use to fly back to. If all your hives are the same color, what you end up with is, if they're all in a line, you tend to end up with more bees going to the outside hives and not returning back to their original colony. Not necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, there's studies that showed up to 30% of bees in any colony are not genetically related to the bees in the colony. So there can be a huge amount of drift. But if you do nice patterns, which are always kind of fun to do as well, so that's kind of my symbol. So one of my hives is kind of fun to do that. I have different colors. It helps a little bit with drift. Although you can also do management techniques if you're having strong colonies, weak colonies. Perry was telling me about this, where if you have a really weak hive and you want to build up the foragers, you can just swap physical locations with a stronger hive, and what will happen is the bees from the stronger hive will locate back to the original location, which is the weaker hive, and they'll become part of that. So actually moving colonies can be a way to help manage the strength of those colonies. So that's just kind of a nice thing to know as well. Yeah?
I've read that for hive spacing, you should at least put enough space between the hives that you can take your supers off or whatever and put them in between on whatever station you have or like platform or whatever. Is there a minimum or a maximum distance or minimum distance you want to keep hives away from each other to either minimize drift or give them their personal space or whatever?
Mostly it's about logistics of what you need to do. Having space to work is very important, so you don't end up knocking over boxes, dropping boxes, running out of space to put things. If I need to just switch a frame here or something like that. Having space around the hives is really good. It kind of opens up, there's some pest issues that can help alleviate as well. But you can have colonies closer together, and like in some of my spaces, it's a little bit tighter. I actually got a painter's platform, a collapsible platform, and it holds 380 pounds or something like that. And I just bring that in the bee yard and I set it down as my mobile location to be able to manage my space. But if I have space, then by all means to be able to have working distance around them is a really good idea.
I think if you get them too close together, because I have two that I put on a pallet
Yeah.
next to each other, and then I learned after the fact that it's like I can only work the hives from the outside or from the back, and I actually like to work hives side to side along the frames.
Yep.
So it's my intention to split them further apart so that I can get 2 feet in there, so I can at least go in there and I can work the hive either from left to right or right to left.
Yep. And that also goes into, like I was talking about with planning for the upcoming year. How am I going to lay out my bee yard? Am I doing, cinder blocks with long planks and I'm just going to line them up in a row? Do I have individual stands for each one? Am I doing pallets? However you do it, you want to get them up off the ground a little bit. You want to try to have a fairly dry surface underneath it. Right now, we don't have a large small hive beetle problem in Colorado, but small hive beetle is located here in Denver, and they are overwintering. So it may become a greater problem going forward. And if you have like just rock underneath it, the hive beetle, their reproductive cycle, they drop out of the colony, they mature in the ground, then they come back in. And if you have a dry rock area, then they can't fulfill that cycle of their lifespan. So that's a way to help manage the potential for small hive beetle. Like I said, it's not a big problem. We tend to be too cold for the small hive beetle to survive well in Colorado, but we're also, with climate change, things are changing. And like I said, we have colonies in Denver that small hive beetle has been seen season to season in the same location. So it is possible. I talked about cleaning up things in the cold. So making sure that you're kind of just prepared for the season, because there's nothing more of the, oh, well, I got all these boxes, ready to go, and you go to grab it and you go, oh my gosh, it's all crapped up and now I got to spend time cleaning it up or managing it or whatever, instead of just going out to the bee yard and getting your stuff done. So now's a good time to just go through your equipment, make sure that it's in good repair, you've fixed anything that's wrong, you replaced anything that you need to, make sure that it's just good and ready for the upcoming season. Any other tips and tricks on equipment anyone has? Yeah.
I think my smoker doesn't work as well when the creosote builds up
Yep.
on the inside. And a really easy way to clean that is just flip the top, turn it upside down, stick that into a bowl of white vinegar. And
Okay.
I leave it overnight, and in the morning it just.
So white vinegar to clean out your creosote.
Yep.
Yep. I also just use a blowtorch and burn it out, but it's just hot. Just be careful with it, you know. Yeah.
Now's the time that I'm making, I like to make little inserts for my smokers with
Oh,
burlap.
yeah.
And then I put some sticks in there, and a couple starters, and then I wrap it with one little, the twine, you know?
Yep.
So that I can always just
Quick
drop
fuel.
a new insert into my smoker. Now's also a good time to get that wire brush out and work on that hive tool. And also, making sure those are cleaned up, and then you always want to go over it with a flame if you can. Because we've learned we don't want to carry things from one hive location to another one. So I'm always trying to look at it and make sure I have yard specific tools.
Brian's talking
Yep.
about
Okay.
cleaning
Having
hive
equipment for
tools.
specific locations or having
Making
means to
smoker
sterilize
bombs.
between locations. And that's also, you know, once again, these are topics that we'll come back to during the summertime. But like that can be an advantage of using disposable gloves over like leather gloves if you're going between the apiaries, because you're changing them out between apiaries, equipment and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Make a mic check kit.
Yep, might check kits, getting things assembled, getting things all ready to go. You know, like I said, I tend to start my first mite checks. I usually do it at the beginning of May. Sometimes it depends on when my hives are really building up, is when I'm going to do my first mite checks. Don't do it in winter. The winter bees are the bees that are going to survive all the way through until that next really build up a brood happens. And they're going to be the ones that are success or failure of the hives. So right now we're being very gentle. We don't want to open the hive on really cold days. We don't want to do an inspection right now. Although, like I said, on warm days, you can certainly pop the top. Do I have live bees running around? If you pop the top and it's 50 degrees outside or 60 degrees outside, and I don't have bees going, what the heck are you doing? I may need to look because I may have lost that colony, and so may be time to do that investigation. That's another good point, is if you are suspecting that you are maybe having colony losses, that you may have a dead out. There are different ways that you can look at it. It's kind of hard to see, but I actually have a thermal camera. And so there are 4 hives here. The 2 that are right here, you can see the cluster and how bright that is. There's actually 2 that are here that were another beekeeper in my yard that were 2 dead outs. So I could tell without opening the hive, without approaching the hives, that I had 2 live hives and I had 2 dead outs. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Everyone has one because they're all rocket scientists. Ryan has one too. Yeah, they're a lot of fun. But if you have dead outs, you do want to go ahead and look at removing those from your apiary, because all they're going to do, if you're just leaving them as is out in the apiary, is you're more likely to bring in pests that you don't want to deal with. Either rodents are going to be attracted to it. It would be a food source for wasps in the springtime. So it's a good idea to go ahead and just clean them up and get them out of the bee yard. You're going to put them back in the bee yard if you're going to do splits back into them or whatever, but go ahead and remove them. Yeah, Barry?
When would you put it back in there for like swarm traps, stuff like that?
Sorry, when would he?
When would you put them back in if you wanted to use one as a swarm trap?
Well, once again, once we're really starting to hit swarm season. So if we're getting to the point where the colonies are building back up, you're starting to see large populations, and you're wanting to use it as a swarm trap, now's the time to bring it back out. But if you're leaving it now, especially if you don't have mouse guards, you just had an entrance reducer or something like that, you can end up with a lot of rodent damage. And if mice get in there and there's no bees to, well, even clustered, mice can cause problems inside a winter colony. So you want to try to manage that as much as you can. So I would still bring it in and then put it out when you hit those goals of, okay, my strategy has changed for this year, I want to put them out as a swarm trap, then I'm going to put it back out. And of course, when you put it back out as a swarm trap, you don't necessarily have to put the entire stack of the hive out there at one time. You're going to actually bring it back down to one box with a cover. You want it to be a manageable size that is the right size to be able to attract a colony, but it's not so big that that colony is not going to be able to effectively manage that space, and then you're going to build it up in the springtime. Yeah?
When you're clearing out a dead out, you guys recommend ways in Colorado for sanitizing that old comb, or just scrape out those dead bees?
Yeah, I mean, you basically shake off most of the dead bees. And part of this is you want to try to figure out, well, why did they die, right? So one of the things you're going to look for is mite frass. So that's mite poop, right? And it's white material. It's typically built up in the tops of the cells, but it'll be in the brood area. You'll see a lot of cells that have all these little tiny white dots in it. That meant that, yeah, it almost looks like crystallized sugar. And it's kind of sticking in the cells a little bit. And when you have that, it's like, okay, I had a mite problem. For whatever reason, I didn't effectively manage that in the appropriate amount of time. I actually had dead outs this year that they died earlier in the season from mites because I didn't effectively treat them. But by looking at it, I'm like, okay, these ones are definitely it. I also had one that it was a swarm that I caught this year, so I don't know, how old the queen was or whatever. They lost their queen in October, and they tried desperately to make one. So right on the edge of that football was 12 different queen cells. But late October, even if they'd made a queen, there was no drones in the environment to mate with, so it was a doomed colony anyway. But it just let me know, okay, that gave me an idea of what happened there. It didn't have all the mite frass, so I know that it wasn't a mite collapse, it was something else that kind of happened. And the thing is, even as well-experienced beekeepers, we will lose colonies. We can try the absolute best that we can to, and we should, do the best animal husbandry that we can to keep our bees alive, but we will lose colonies. So it's just something to be prepared on. It's just trying to figure out, what kind of things can we do to do better in the next season.
So the American Beekeeper Federation just had their annual conference in January in Reno, and one of the presentations was on what do you do when you have a dead out. If you can figure out what it is, like you said, yours with a swarm with the bees, with the queen cells, we know they just couldn't survive. Those frames are probably okay.
Yep.
If you have one that you know was from mites, you're going to scrape all that comb out of there or start over with fresh frames. You do not want to bring that back into your hives. If you do not know what killed your bees, do the same thing. You want to get rid of those so you're not bringing new bees in and getting a new disease to them.
Yep. The other thing is, the best practice if you're trying to store any residual honey to be able to backfeed in the springtime is put it in a freezer if you have space. Pollen, once again, if it, fresh pollen can last well in a freezer. If it sits around too long, it'll end up kind of looking a little, is it greasy that it looks after it's sat for a while?
Kind of moldy.
Yeah. Especially if it molds, they're not going to use it. And so there's no point putting it back into a colony, so go ahead and scrape that down, replace the foundation and put it back in, and, try again in the spring. So store, you keep what resources you can. The bees spend a lot of energy making, especially wax. So as much as you can keep is an advantage for the next colony coming in because they don't have to do that part of the hive construction themselves. And so you'll end up with a higher honey yield. You'll end up with a healthier colony. But if you have other diseases, if there are melted brood from American foul brood or European foul brood or some of those kind of disease conditions, you're not necessarily going to want to be putting those frames back into a new colony because you don't want to take the chance of reinfecting the new colony that you just went to all the effort of getting new bees for.
Always do a smell check.
Oh yeah, the smell check. So, if it is smelling like rotten meat, then the whole hive really is going to probably be burned, and you want to take that seriously. I know several beekeepers that have had experience with American foul brood, and it is highly contagious. It lives forever, and it is not something that we want to mess with or allow to spread.
Do we track American foul brood in Colorado?
So, you heard the big sigh, right?
Huge collective site. We do not have a state apiary inspector.
Okay.
And there's absolutely no mechanism.
The question was, do we track American foul brood in Colorado?
Writing articles.
The question, or the answer is no, not necessarily.
Trying to drum up support for reviving the Colorado Bee Act, which would allow us to get, the problem is funding it, of course. Everything in Colorado is how you would pay for it. But yeah, no, we have no.
Yeah.
absolutely no
We have no state
tracking system. It's just
apiarist,
word of mouth.
beekeeper.
Oh, I heard somebody in southeast Douglas County had an AFB. Yeah, it's not a good situation, really.
Yep.
About Nozema, we have a lot of Nozema too.
We don't know that.
I have not heard a lot of that. Occasionally what I see in the springtime is going to be stone brood or chalk brood. And usually that's a fungal disease. And usually it's a moisture issue within the colony. And a lot of times it will clear up on its own. You just kind of, address the moisture problems, and sometimes you can requeen. There are times that seems to help, but it's not always required. And that tends to help, in the springtime. Do you have another comment?
Strong microbials helps also.
Yeah.
There's a product out called Strong Microbials that will help with a lot of the brood issues. Like some of the people are saying there's not a lot of American foul brood in Colorado that a lot of people have, but when you get it, they're taken care of right away. There's
The comment was that
There's a way to.
there's strong microbials that can take care of the brood
Find out what's
and
by sending
help fix a lot of
I
that.
used to take one of the smallest boxes that USPS has for one rate box and cut a chunk of the comb out of a frame and send it to the bee lab, and they will test it for you.
Yep. The bee lab in Maryland will test for
This is what you need to do to treat it.
diseases.
There's obviously, there's three of them, I think, is there three of them?
That sounds all right.
There's one in Beltsville, Maryland, one in, that's the one I was.
Yep. That's one I've heard everyone sending to is in Maryland, to the USDA lab for testing. Any other comments on equipment, assembling, maintaining, things that we need to do? All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about the Golden Bee Award. So the club has the Golden Bee, which is an award that we present to a member that has really kind of gone above and beyond and done something great. Be careful and bring it up. Here it is. Ooh, ah, wow. And this month's recipient gets to take it home and cherish it and pet it and do all the things that they, glance at it and feel awesome. And this year award is going to Anne for helping us with our nonprofit. Thank you so much.
Good job, man.
Speech.
All right. And then, so we only have two more things to do. We've got Crud Cutter Confessions. And what Crud Cutter Confessions is the Rust-Oleum Corporation makes a product called Crud Cutter, and we have found that this is fantastic for cleaning up equipment. It especially is good on propolis, which nothing else seems to dissolve very well. And to get your own bottle of Crud Cutter, you just need to come up and tell a story. Humorous stories are great, but you can also tell a story that is just kind of a lessons learned as a beekeeper, something that is going to be helpful to others. So do we have any good bee stories? Don't be shy. Otherwise, I'm going to have to tell one.
Come on, Barry's got a great story.
About your fingers, Mary.
No, that was not bee related. Although it did heal. December, at that meeting, I had an 1/8-inch gap cut out of this finger. And all I treated it with was honey. And all I used for antibiotics was propolis.
All right.
3 weeks in.
So Perry used honey and propolis for treating a wound, and that healed up really well.
Leave duct tape for bandages, right?
No, it's like, thank you, though.
And the cheaper the electrical tape, the worse it burns, but the better it works.
That's right.
There you go.
How many brand new beekeepers are in the room?
1, 2,
First year,
4, 5.
Will be.
5.
Okay, well, not that I'm hindering
Bands up front.
Here, you got to come up front.
The limp is for the, the effect.
Just rub some honey on it or some propolis.
Can I borrow some of your honey from my knee? What is that?
It's the microphone.
A bee tool and a microphone. Everything's up to date in Kansas City. When I took the Montana course, the first course, it's before the journeyman. What's it called? Apprentice course. It was a great course, and I would recommend that course. It's online. But my objection was that the professors giving the course are all excellent, experienced beekeepers. But none of them were wearing their bee suits or gloves or just veils. And at least one of the professors didn't actually say it, but intimated that, real manly beekeepers don't need bee suits. And I wrote, after, of course, I made sure I passed, that, well, my mama didn't raise no fools, but, that's debatable. But that there were a lot of people in the course that were brand new beekeepers and looking for guidance. And the best example I can give is last year. I had a young man, you guys maybe, some of you remember Eric, great big behemoth guy, brand new beekeeper, and we were in my apiary. At that time I had bees. And I handed him a frame loaded with bees. And he was so intent in looking at it, he kind of looked like this, and his veil went next to his face, and he got stung on the chin, and he drops the frame of bees. And fortunately, I had the foresight to be wearing sneakers so I could run faster than him. And I think I'm kidding. But if we had been, we're manly men and we don't need bee suits, it could have really been because those bees were not happy. So, there's all this, the bee suit's hot and do you really need all that? At the bare minimum, you should always wear a veil. If any of you have friends that are firefighters. They will tell you that a firefighter, regardless of the size of a fire, will always put on their bunker outfit, always. It's just axiomatic. Well, beekeepers should always put on their protective clothing, at least a veil, for the time when you drop a frame and the bees decide to tell you that was a mistake. So, yes, sir.
I was told years ago that if you get stung in your eye, you lose the sight in your eye.
I don't doubt it.
So for that reason.
The comment was, if you get
Yeah.
stung in the
Now,
eye, then you
there
lose your
is,
eye.
there's something to be said for once you're very experienced, maybe you give up the gloves, because then you have better dexterity and you've learned how to handle a frame and how to do everything in beekeeping at half speed. Just pretend you're in slow motion. And that's why I've said before, and this is pandering, that I think women make better beekeepers than men, all things being considered. Yeah, well, that was Fran. Because you are, by nature, gentler, and, we guys tend to grab things and, like this. And I'm speaking about myself. But if you go, try to physically tell yourself to go at half speed. Pull that frame out slower than you think you need to, so you're not rolling the bees. Putting it back in so gently that there's no way you're squishing any bees, because a squished bee is also giving off an alarm pheromone to other bees. And it's things like that, going at slow motion, being very gentle. You will find experienced beekeepers oftentimes will hum or sing to their bees, and it, just like the cowboys of old sung to their herds during night herding, it calms them down. It actually.
Calm yourself down.
And in my case, when I'd stop, they got happy again. Another real important aspect is when you get experienced enough, when you open your hive, you listen to the tone of the buzzing of the bees. And if you're attuned to that, you can actually hear when you've overstayed your welcome, the tone will change. And it's time to put it back together and leave. And, they'll tolerate you up to a point, and all of a sudden, the tone will change. And it's these things you can't get out of a book. It's surviving the stings and saying, okay, I've dodged a bullet, I'm not going to do that again. But always wear your sneakers so you can outrun the guy. So, anyway, I didn't mean to okay.
Excellent, thank you. Any other stories? All right, since we only have one, our winner. Here you go, Vance. There you go. Don't use it all in one place.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and like Vance has said, they can change, right? So I've also had colonies this year. It was actually the first time that I ended up smelling banana, which is the alarm pheromone. And the bees were extremely calm. They were going along just fine. I got through the inspection of one of my boxes. I took it off. They're still calm. Everything's great. I just touched one of the frames and it was a volcano that came up. So I believe in personal protective equipment. Having at least that veil to keep them off my face, I highly recommend. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and go on to the raffle. And so I probably can go ahead and include this. So we have a variety of different things. So we have mountain mics, Stop the Sting. This works really well. I've used it several times and it's one of the favorites. We have some adjustable mouse guards. We have a frame grabber, so you can grab the frame from the middle to be able to lift it up. There is the beekeeping or beekeeper's journal. There is a beekeeper's handbook. There's a capping tool, which is actually really nice. I ordered one and got one of these this year. There are some frame hangers, so you can use this to put on the outside of the box to be able to hang your frames. We have smoker fuel. What's smoky? There is a decorative Be Happy. There are some little cushions that fit inside cup holders in your car. There is some honeycomb ribbon, a hat that is bee kind, it's got a bee and says kind, a little bee necklace, and a kitchen towel. So lots of stuff.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and end the stream here. See y'all on the next one.
All right. So if I call your number, you're going to come out and you get to choose